Hey guys, just a little something I thought we could talk about before we all go on holiday and eat a lot of turkey. So this video is inspired by a podcast from Lori Forner, Pelvic Health Podcast, which I encourage you to check out. She has a lot of great information and talks a lot about a lot of interesting things in that podcast. But she featured one podcast talking about double unders and treating a lot of female athletes and CrossFitters. I come across a lot of women that leak when doing double unders. So one study that she referenced was a study by Campbell and O'Sullivan, which looked at if people were bracing or tightening the abdominals while jumping, that it actually decreased their knee flexion and their hip flexion when landing, and thus increased ground reaction forces. So the force like coming back up through your limbs, through your torso as you're landing through a jump, which is going to create increased demands on the body and thus would likely lead to increased demands on the pelvic floor muscles and maybe make you more likely to leak. So interesting concept. Do you really want to be over tightening the abdominals when you're doing double unders? Maybe tightening the abdominals too much actually can lead to leakage. And as we always talk about this being more of a pressure system, if I'm thinking about squeezing from the top, that pressure has to go somewhere, and that may be going downwards onto the pelvic floor, making you more likely to leak. So one thing I'll often talk to my athletes about is just keeping the torso stacked over the pelvis and seeing if you can stay a little bit more relaxed when you're doing your double unders. I think another thing that can lead to increased pressure downwards onto the pelvic floor is like if we do like a breath hold or if we're straining. So if you can keep that thorax over the pelvis and then keep just a regular breathing pattern. So like inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Now that's probably going to get a little bit more challenging as you're really putting your body through the ringer a little bit more and the workout gets a little bit harder. But if you can kind of be aware of that, that might help a little bit. So if double unders are really hard for you, that might make you more likely to tense up. That's when people will sometimes like go into like more of this pike position when they're trying to get the rope to pass twice underneath them, or maybe like more of a tuck jump. So just like working on that skill. So maybe it's practicing like bigger jumps and doing single unders, or working on hopping on one foot single unders, but then keeping that breath pattern. So these are just things I want you to consider when you're practicing double unders. But I think most important, just practicing that breath pattern can really help a lot. And one other thing that Lori mentioned that I thought was really interesting is I often tell women not to arch too much up when they are doing the double unders. I think mostly because I think that sometimes can contribute to breath holding and this kind of like pattern. But one thing that Lori mentioned that I thought was interesting is that sometimes she feels like when she does that, she's lifting a little bit more and then she can take a little bit of pressure off the pelvic floor and the bladder. And as I just took a low pressure fitness course, when we do that vacuum technique, we're lifting the diaphragm and thus lifting the bladder, lifting the pelvic floor. So it does make sense that maybe lifting the chest can be a good technique for some women to use. So play around with it. Play around with keeping like a regular breath pattern. Play around with keeping like ribs stacked over pelvis. Work on building your skill set using single unders. one-legged jumps, practicing really high, passing single unders. And then play with if the chest is rung up, or see what happens when the chest is rung down. I wonder if the chest is rung down, if you're going to feel a lot more pressure when you're practicing these things. Happy Thanksgiving. You guys take care.